Chapter 9.
Wow.
It was all I could say. Tim couldn't say anything. We both just stared. There were trees that grew so high into the sky they disappeared into the air. Their trunks were as big around as a house. I remember seeing big redwood trees once we went to California. That's what these trees look like, except the trunks were blue. The tree trunks were blue, and high above, way up in the sky, the leaves were red. And the entire forest was that way. Small bushes had yellow limbs and purple leaves. The grass beneath our feet was green, but it was very shiny, emerald green. It was very quiet, except for a small, unseen creek that was babbling nearby. There were no birds, no crickets, no cars or planes, no people.
This is really weird,
Tim said. Finally, I turned and looked at where we had come from. It was just as I had suspected. We had emerged from one of the enormous trees. As crazy as it sounds, we've been pulled into the tree by the tree itself. Only now, we were somewhere totally different. I was sure that we weren't on Mackinac Island anymore. My friends at school would never believe this.
How do we get out of here?
Tim said, but I didn't know. I thought that maybe if we climbed back into the tree, we could somehow climb back out, but I wasn't sure if I wanted to do that. All of a sudden, the hole in the tree where we had come from began to close. There was a crunching sound as the crack pulled together. Wherever we were stuck there. I don't know if you've ever had the feeling that you're all alone, on your own, but let me tell you, it is not fun. I felt like I was going to cry, but I didn't. I think Tim did, just a tiny bit, but I didn't say anything. We were alone, completely alone. I don't know how long we just stood there like that, staring. Everything looked so weird. Suddenly, Tim spoke and raised his arm, pointing.
Sandy, look.
I looked where he was pointing and I saw a flash of moons by one of the huge tree trunks. Now I was really scared. Before, I was scared because we were all alone. Now, I was scared because I realized that we were in a strange world that I had never seen before. I was scared because we weren't alone. There was someone, or something, else here too. Chapter 10. There comes a time when you stop worrying about being late for supper and just worry about the problem at hand. That time was now. We saw movement again, this time in some bushes.
What do you think it is?
I whispered. Tim took a step closer to me. He was scared too.
I don't know.
He stammered. The bushes moved again.
Maybe it's the little man with the long hair and the pointy hat.
I said, "Righty-ho, righty-ho." A voice behind suddenly boomed out. He must have heard me. His voice scared me, and Tim jumped too. Suddenly, the little old man appeared from the bushes. I grabbed Tim, and he grabbed me and held on tight. I wanted to run, fast and furious. But then what? Where would I go? The man wasn't actually so little after all. I mean, he was little as far as a man was concerned. He was about my height, but his pointed hat made him look taller. His long gray hair fell over his shoulders and his beard went all the way down to the ground to his waist. His white robe almost touched the ground. As he drew closer, I could feel Tim hold me tighter. He was really scared. So was I. "Yes, indeed," the old man said again. "It is I, the only." His beard suddenly caught on a small branch. I yanked his head around. He yelled, "Ow!" he shouted. "I hate it when that happens." If I hadn't been so afraid, I might have thought it was very funny. He untangled his beard from the branch and kept walking towards us. I guess he didn't look real scary, but I was afraid anyway. Being in such a strange, unknown place can be a pretty scary thing sometimes.
What do you want?
I stammered. I think Tim was too afraid to say anything. But the man ignored me. Instead, he just kept looking at me, then at Tim, then at me. He glared at us with wide, silver blue eyes. "Yes, yes," he said. "I think you'll do. You both look healthy and strong enough. You'll work out perfect."
Perfect for what?
Tim sputtered. He was still scared, but he wasn't holding on to me so tight anymore. "To find the key, of course," the old man replied quickly, throwing up his hands like we were supposed to know what he was talking about.
What key?
I asked. Again, he looked perplexed. "The key," he said. Then, "The stone key. It's the key I need to get out of this infernal place."
Well, Mr.
I began, but I didn't know what to call him. I think he sensed this because he interrupted. I am the great salami-knocking Mortimer Jeremiah Tutworth, he replied proudly. Now I did laugh.
The great what?
Tim asked. The old man repeated himself this time, and Tim and I both laughed. The old man looked at us coldly. I hope we didn't make him mad.
I'm sorry, Mr. Great, Sir, but that name is such a strange name.
And tell me, young one, just what is your name?
I'm Sandy Johnson, and this is my brother Tim.
Those are the funniest names I've ever... His voice was suddenly interrupted by a terrible whooshing sound like flapping birds. A long shadow came over the forest, and the entire woods went almost completely dark. Oh, no! The old man cried. It's a wartwing! Follow me! We must take cover! A what? I thought. I had never heard of a wartwing before. I didn't know what one was, and I'm not sure I really wanted to. I was frightened, but I had to look up to see what had scared the old man so much. I was immediately sorry that I did. What I saw above us was the scariest thing I'd ever seen in my life. It was a creature. It had giant wings like a bird, but it was all brown and had scales like a dragon, and warts like a toad. Its mouth was open, and I could see a long red tongue lashing from side to side. It was as big as a house, and it was coming right for us. Chapter 11. Have you ever been so scared that you just couldn't move? That's how I felt. I just stood there, looking up into the sky as this horrible creature swooped closer. Run! Now! I heard the man with the pointed hat yell. Run now or we are all doomed! That was all the prodding I needed. I sprang forward, following the old man as he ran through the strange, colorful forest. Tim was at my side. We ran as fast as we could, following the old man over the shiny green grass as he led us deeper into the forest. I could hear the shrieking cries of the wartwing behind us. I could even hear the thunderous pumping of its wings as they beat the air. Tim managed a quick glance over his shoulder.
Sandy, now there's two of them.
There was a time when you could just trust your brother and you didn't need to see for yourself. Not often, but I took his word for it this time. If Tim said there were two creatures, I believed him. Hurry! The old man yelled, turning his head back toward us as he shouted, If we don't hurry, there'll be more! Then there will be no escape! Suddenly, I saw the old man's white robe duck beneath some branches. Tim and I followed, not sure where we were going, but at the moment, we didn't care. We just didn't want that huge wartwing to catch us. I think anything would be better than that. As I ducked beneath the branches, I stumbled and fell forward, crashing to the ground and rolling. Tim had tumbled as well, and I fell on top of him, and we both rolled, arms and legs flailing. We came to a stop. We were in a small room. It looked like we were on the inside of a tree, like the inside of a giant trunk. The old man suddenly burst behind us, closing a heavy wood door. There was a long board that served as a bolt, and he slid it over the door. Whew! He said. That was close! My heart was pounding. I was out of breath. And so was Tim.
What was that thing?
I asked. A wartwing! The ugliest, nastiest, meanest thing in the captive forest.
The what forest?
Tim asked. The old man looked annoyed. You sure ask a lot of questions, he said.
Well, Mr. Great, whatever you call yourself.
I began to say. I was starting to get a little annoyed myself. I don't think Mom and Dad were going to like the fact that we were being chased by wartwings on Mackinac Island, of all places, or wherever we were. You may call me the Great Tutworth, for short, the old man began. Fine, I can remember the Great Tutworth.
We don't know where we are,
I continued.
My brother and I were sucked into an old tree, and somehow we wound up here. I don't know where we are.
You are presently in my home in the captive forest on the Isle of Mayhem.
Isle of Mayhem?
Tim and I both said in unison. Precisely, the Great Tutworth answered, nodding his head. His long hat bowed forward as he nodded. The Isle of Mayhem, quite a dreadful place, really. I've been here, probably 7,000 years, give or take several hundred.
7,000 years?
I exclaimed.
What happened to Mackinac Island? The fort, the Grand Hotel.
The Great Tutworth looked perplexed. I'm not sure I've heard of those places, he said. But then again, I've been prisoner in the captive forest so very, very long.
But what do you want from us?
Tim asked. The stone key, the old man replied. I must have the stone key. It is somewhere on the island.
Can't you go get it?
I asked him. Suddenly, he looked very sad. No, I'm afraid I can't, he answered. You see, I was once a miracle maker, the most powerful miracle maker in the land. Many years ago, during the War of Magic, the terrible King Balderdash unleashed the powers of darkness on this island. It used to be called the Isle of Miracles, but ever since, it has become known as the Isle of Mayhem. I cannot leave the captive forest because of an invisible magical barrier all around it. I am stuck, I'm afraid, until I have the stone key. The stone key is the only hope for returning the Isle of Mayhem back to the Isle of Miracles, and it has even greater importance than that.
What's that?
I asked. I was finding all of this very hard to believe. Because not only is it the key to unlocking the captive forest, he explained, but it is also the very same key that locks up all the powers of darkness. When the stone key is found and the captive forest is unlocked, the Isle of Miracles will come back, and all the powers of darkness will be cast into the abyss of no return. Now I really knew that Mom and Dad weren't going to believe this. The stone key is the only thing that can lock the powers of darkness away, the great Tutworth said sadly. He looked grim and almost helpless. I suddenly felt very sorry for him. Away from his home and family for so long, he really did look very sad and lonely.
Where is the key?
I asked. It is buried deep within Skull Mountain, here on the Isle of Mayhem. I am trapped in this forest. I can't leave to find the key. That's why I must ask for you to help.
What if we don't want to?
Tim asked.
I mean, you can't make us.
I'm afraid I have no choice, the Miracle Maker replied, shaking his head.
What do you mean by that?
Tim asked.
I mean, we have to go home. Mom's making supper right now, and if we're late...
There won't be any supper for you at your home tonight, the great Tutworth interrupted. He took a step toward us, staring coldly into our eyes. You see, the same key that frees me from the captive forest is the same key that will open the door of realms and will take you back to your own world. If you do not find the stone key, it will be impossible for you to ever go home. Ever. This was crazy. The Isle of Mayhem, the captive forest, Skull Mountain, a door of realms. I knew right then that we were in deep trouble.